Thank you, Daniele. I will briefly summarize what we have discussed and convened with respect to the sustainable finance issue, regulatory finance, what the changes in the regulation, and other financial issues. The first thing I would like to say is that the activities of the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group are now really starting, and they are developing in very fast in a direction which is very important. This group is co-chaired by China and the United States, and it benefits from the support of international organizations, financial sector networks, and private sector representatives. The progress it is making has to do with, first of all, the development of a multi-year roadmap, roadmap on sustainable finance, which certainly includes how to deal with climate change and sustain the challenges that come from climate change, but goes also beyond that. It is not limited to the climate, even if this is the most pressing issue that relates to the sustainability of our economies. Obviously, under the label of sustainability, we have development, we have society, and so there are issues which will also be considered over time by this group that is going to remain working for the G20. The roadmap that's been put forward by the group can be divided in a number of areas. The first has to do with how to align financial flows with sustainability objectives. Second is really to provide reliable and timely information on the risks related to sustainability, on the opportunities, and on impacts of changes. The third has to do with the assessment and management of climate and sustainability risks. The fourth is to leverage public finance and incentives in order to meet the objectives that we establish over time. And the fifth concerns cross-cutting elements such as the potential effects of fintech solutions for sustainable finance. There will be a synthesis report and the roadmap that will be delivered in October. We concur that quality data and comparable frameworks for disclosure are crucial for addressing climate-related financial risks and mobilizing sustainable finance. Then we discussed two Financial Stability Board reports. The first concerns the availability of data for financial institutions to monitor and assess climate-related risks to financial stability. Basically, there are many data gaps, and especially in a number of countries, there are no resources really to collect information, so you need a cooperative approach to that, and there is a commitment to working to address existing data gaps with the support of the Financial Stability Board and other relevant bodies in helping financial authorities to make use of scenario analysis through that which utilizes this data, the collection of this data. The second report has to do with the promotion of climate-related disclosures. In our discussion, we agreed on the objective of achieving globally consistent, comparable, and reliable climate-related disclosures from corporations. We welcome the Financial Stability Board's recommendations for financial authorities to promote a high-quality and consistent implementation of disclosure requirements and guidance, and these will build on the task force on climate-related financial disclosure that works within the FSB and its indications in line with the jurisdictions, different jurisdictions, legal and regulatory frameworks. It is a work that will contribute to a more uniform approach among national and regional financial authorities, so to pave the way for future coordination at the global level in the efforts towards developing a baseline global reporting standard. And in this respect, we have been considering and welcoming the program of the IFRS Foundation, which is developing a baseline global reporting standard under robust governance and public oversight, building upon the task force framework and the work of sustainability standard setters. There was also welcoming the roadmap that the Financial Stability Board put forward to address climate-related risk to financial stability, which sets out priority actions and indicative timeframes that will be followed during the coming years under the chairmanship of the different countries that will take over. The interesting thing is that there are two roadmaps, and there should be no confusion between the two. One is the roadmap of the Sustainable Finance Working Group, and the other is the roadmap of the Financial Stability Board. The second really has a very limited and deep objective, that of assessing the risks and ensuring the maintenance of financial stability that may be affected by climate change. And so in this sense, it will, the disclosures, the data, the filling of data gaps, this definition of the effects, stress testing, if you want, of risks coming from climate change on the balance sheets of financial intermediaries and so on, is really the object of this work and the roadmap that will be followed. The other, as I said, is wider in scope. It considers what kind of instruments can be used to obtain the objectives. It has to do with a wider definition of sustainability. It includes, for example, biodiversity. Over time, we will have also that kind of nature and biodiversity objectives. The interesting thing is that we have decided that these roadmaps are living instruments for progressing work, so they will be adjusted flexibly as priorities evolve over time. And basically, this is simply the realization, the fact that climate change in this case is something that has to be monitored constantly in terms of both the targets and the results in using the instruments that we will define. The financial regulation side had been developed discussing two reports. One, an interim report by the FSB on the lessons learned from the pandemic from a financial stability perspective. So the lesson learned, basically how banks were able to face the shocks that came from the pandemic, so the resilience and so on, and also what we have learned about the non-bank financial sector turmoil, the liquidity strains that we observed, for example, in March last year, and which have been addressed through central bank interventions, either directly or indirectly. And these lessons will be the starting point that will be put together, inclusive of what we are going to observe this year for a final report that will be presented to the summit. The other report has to do directly on non-bank financial intermediation, and it is a consultation report that sets out policy proposals to enhance money market funds resilience. Money market funds really were the one who most showed the largest, highest volatility in the spring of last year. And we concurred with the main messages from the review of the lessons learned from the pandemic, even if we said that they are still tentative, because clearly the health crisis is not yet over. The G20 financial regulatory firms following the global financial crisis have played a key role in putting banks on a sounder footing, and this has been recognized by all, both the capital ratios being sufficiently high, the buffers being used there, banks acting this time as a cushion not an amplifier of the shocks, even if it was noted that there is a need now to complete the remaining elements of the reform package, including Basel III. At the same time, the review brings to the light the need for further scrutiny of some aspects of the functioning of the regulatory frameworks, and basically trying to understand whether the use of capital and liquidity buffers is efficient, can be used efficiently, the performance of countercyclical elements in prudential regulation, potential remaining sources of excessive procyclicality. All issues that will be explored further before putting them in the report that will be finalized for the Leaders' Summit in October. Now, as I was saying, the pandemic basically, however, has shown us that there are aspects of somehow vulnerabilities that may persist in certain segments of the non-bank financial intermediation, which basically now covers around 50% of the total intermediation of the financial sector. And so in this sense, the idea is to try to find out ways to somehow reinforce the ability of this sector to face shocks while preserving the benefits, its benefits. I said something about the money market fund sector, the fact that this is certainly an area which does not exhaust all what we have to do on the non-bank financial intermediation sector. There are issues related to liquidity enhancing in, for example, open-ended funds and so on. These will be taken over, even if will not be in the report that will be finalized in October. We also agreed with the main messages of another progress report that had to do with the transition from LIBOR towards robust alternatives that will substitute LIBOR in the course of the year. And what is interesting, we discussed at length the financial inclusion agenda. This obviously has a different considerations and effects according whether you are in emerging and developing countries and whether you are in advanced economies, but the two issues which have to do with with consumer protection on the financial side and with the literacy with which households and small micro firms and so on need to have to use the digital instruments that also in the financial sector are being developed in the most recent years are two concerns which are really crucial. The final thing that was discussed had to do with the combat money laundering and countering terrorist financing, and also the environmental crime, which is an object that is being dealt with by the Financial Action Task Force, and there was an agreement at the end to somehow enhance the work done at the regional level by the various bodies that apply standards which have been developed by the FATF or GAFI, as you want to call it. I think that this concludes more or less what we have discussed on the financial side, and obviously we are open to take your question and answer them.